The metallic shriek was the first thing to tear through the cabin's fragile peace, followed by a violent lurch that sent loose items flying. Everyone was screaming, fumbling for their phones, their faces illuminated by the pale blue light of screens as they composed frantic goodbyes. Liam's fingers, slick with sweat, flew across his own screen. He wasn't texting his family. He opened the chat log with the one person he'd spent the better part of a decade hating, loving, and never understanding. He typed with a furious clarity, "You goddamn idiot with 2 holes in your head for eyes. Couldn't you see I was in love with you? That night I was drunk. I practically gave you an invitation and you blew it. Too late now. Hope you regret it. I'm hitting the reset button on this whole life." His body felt impossibly heavy, pressed into the seat as the plane fell. The air thinned, and black spots danced in his vision. After another bone-jarring tremor, the phone slipped from his grasp. His hand shot out instinctively, closing not on cold plastic, but on something unexpectedly solid and warm. It was strange. He couldn't imagine what on the plane would feel like this. In the near-total silence of the cabin, punctuated only by muffled sobs, a voice cut through the fog in his head. It asked how long he planned on holding on. Someone else was still conscious. He had thought everyone else had passed out from the lack of oxygen. The voice asked if he was deaf, then mused that perhaps he didn't want to let go. It was closer this time, clearer, and unervingly familiar. His sluggish mind finally placed it. It was Caleb's voice, the same Caleb he had just unloaded on. All the bravado from his final message evaporated. In the end, he had to admit his nonchalance was a lie. He was bitter, so bitter that his oxygen-starved brain was conjuring auditory hallucinations. But the voice had a certain quality, a younger, more reckless edge he hadn't heard in years. He tried to make sense of it, his thoughts dissolving like smoke. Then, a sharp tug on his arm, like being yanked from deep water. The sudden ability to draw a full breath made his eyes fly open. He saw a face, sharp and handsome, with eyebrows arched in a familiar, challenging way and a smirk that was all confidence. It was Caleb. In an instant, his senses came rushing back. The insistent drone of cicadas in the thick summer air, the rich scent of sun-baked wood floors, a bead of sweat tracing a slow path down his temple, and the undeniable fact that he was clutching Caleb's hand. Caleb's smirk widened as he wondered aloud if Liam was about to join the long line of people confessing their feelings to him. It wasn't a hallucination. Liam slowly retracted his hand, staring at his palm. The skin was healthy, his pulse a strong and steady rhythm beneath it. He clenched and unclenched his fist. He was in control of his own body. Caleb clicked his tongue, remarking that Liam had spent so much time with his nose in a book, he'd finally turned into a total nerd. Liam looked up and saw the blue and gold varsity letter on Caleb's jacket. It was the summer of 2016. He was a junior in high school. Caleb was a senior. They had always been like oil and water. Liam detested Caleb's cavalier, swaggering attitude, and Caleb found Liam's quiet intensity to be profoundly dull. Yet, Caleb's younger brother, Aaron, was Liam's best friend, which meant he spent most afternoons at their house, ostensibly doing homework. Caleb leaned against the window frame, his expression one of casual disdain. He gestured with his chin toward the yard below, where Aaron was standing awkwardly as another boy from their school asked him to prom. Of the 3 brothers, Aaron was the one who always had a flock of admirers. Caleb scoffed, muttering about how messed up it was, then turned his gaze directly on Liam, his eyes sharp and serious despite the mocking curve of his lips. He asked for Liam's agreement. Didn't he think so? The 17-year-old Liam would have nodded, eager to find common ground with Caleb on anything. But the mind in that body was 25, and it had seen 8 years of the world change. 8 years of his own feelings for the man in front of him souring from annoyance into a desperate, all-consuming love. He couldn't bring himself to lie. He just shook his head, saying he didn't understand the problem. Caleb's playful expression fell. He mumbled that bookworms were no fun and turned away, his back radiating a palpable irritation. Liam stood there, watching him go, a wave of confusion washing over him. He didn't know if he'd traveled back in time or been reborn. Either way, it meant his 25-year-old self was gone. He wondered what Caleb would feel when he heard the news. Would he feel any guilt, knowing that Liam was on that doomed flight only to attend his engagement party? The 18-year-old Caleb had no impending marriage. He was, however, furious that Liam couldn't catch a basketball. He screamed that even the valedictorian should be able to handle a simple chest pass and that he was practically placing the ball in his hands. He wanted to know if Liam's eyes were just for decoration. The shouting made Liam's ears ring, and the dizzying sensation of the plane's descent returned. He dropped the ball and told Caleb he was done playing. Aaron jogged over, attempting to smooth things over by explaining that Caleb's abrasive personality wasn't personal. He was like that with everyone. Liam knew that. Caleb was an equal opportunity offender, but he always saved a special kind of vitriol for him. He was staring into space on a splintered wooden bench when a bottle of Gatorade landed in his lap. He fumbled it, and it rolled onto the dusty court. With a sigh of theatrical frustration, Caleb picked it up and handed it back. He told him to drink it, commenting on how pale he looked, as if he might pass out. When Liam didn't move, Caleb snatched the bottle back, twisted the cap with a sharp crack, and shoved it forcefully into his hand, sarcastically asking if he needed to be spoon-fed. Liam obediently lifted the bottle and took a sip. It was grape. Caleb's expression softened slightly, and he sat down next to him, watching Aaron practice free throws. He asked if Liam had been up studying until dawn again, working on his AP prep books. Their houses were adjacent, their bedroom windows separated only by a narrow garden path, close enough that he could see the light on in Liam's room all night. He questioned if his top rank was so precarious that it depended on one extra practice test. Liam wasn't usually one to take such insults lying down. The expected retort was on the tip of his tongue, something about Caleb hoping to see him fail. But when he opened his mouth, the words that came out were different. "Are you worried about me?" Caleb froze. A dark flush crept up his neck, and he shot to his feet. He spat out a denial, calling him an idiot before stalking back onto the court, where he proceeded to miss every single shot Aaron threw his way. Liam slowly screwed the cap back on the bottle, his heart hammering against his ribs. Maybe this was a second chance. A chance to see the things he had missed the first time around, when he was too young to understand that Caleb's taunts were a clumsy shield for something else entirely. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to calm the wild hope blooming there. Caleb jogged back, his voice tight. He asked if Liam was feeling sick. Liam shook his head. In the bright, unforgiving sunlight, he thought that maybe, with a second chance, things between them could be different. He fell asleep with that hopeful thought, but the ceiling he woke up to was the popcorn-textured one of his college dorm room. He closed his eyes and opened them again. Nothing changed. A cold dread, like damp moss, crept over him as he lay perfectly still. It wasn't a second chance. It was a dying man's life flashing before his eyes. There was no miracle. He was still on a collision course with the inevitable, and there was nothing he could do to change it. Aaron knocked on the frame of his bunk bed, reminding him to come straight to their house after his last class for the party. Liam stiffly reached for his phone. The calendar notification read, Aaron's 21st birthday. He remembered this day perfectly. Halfway through the party, a violent thunderstorm had knocked out the power to the entire neighborhood. After waiting an hour for the utility company, he decided to walk back to his own house in the dark. Caleb had insisted on walking with him. He was asking if Liam heard them, a conversation identical to the one in his memory. Aaron and his boyfriend were making out somewhere in the darkened house. Liam opened his front door and crouched in the entryway to untie his sneakers, replying that it was normal since they were a couple. Caleb didn't leave. He leaned against the doorframe, a silhouette in the oppressive darkness. He remembered that Liam had never been kissed. The conversation was unfolding exactly as it had before. Next, a mortified Liam was supposed to snap that it was none of his business, and Caleb would magnanimously offer to help him out. The help had involved being pressed against the wall and kissed until the lights flickered back on. Afterward, Caleb had explained it away as a weird, impulsive moment, blaming the darkness and the sounds from his brother's room, telling him not to take it seriously. Liam's heart, which had been soaring, had plummeted. To save face, he'd agreed, joking that kissing another guy was no different from kissing a slab of meat. Now, as Caleb waited for his response, he laughed and asked if Liam was too embarrassed to admit it. No, Liam said. It's gone now. Caleb fell silent. He sounded genuinely shocked when he asked who it was and if Liam was dating someone. He then answered his own question, saying it was impossible since Aaron had told him Liam was still single. He scoffed, asking if he meant that time in kindergarten. He told him that didn't count. A real first kiss had to be with someone you wanted. His words hung in the air. The darkness did amplify the senses. Liam could hear the subtle hitch in Caleb's breathing. He feigned a moment of realization and said that in that case, his first kiss was still available. He asked if that was a problem. Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained. He asked if Liam needed him. Needed him for what? After another pause, Caleb took a deep breath and asked if hearing them didn't make him feel an impulse to do the same thing. Liam stared toward the silhouette, his own voice steady when he replied that he didn't. He did, desperately, but he knew that no matter what he chose in this memory, the future was already written. Still, he wanted to know if his years of pining had not been entirely one-sided. Caleb, having lost his pretext, was silent. Liam relented first. He admitted that maybe he did feel a little bit of an impulse, but as Caleb himself said, it only counted if it was with someone you liked. He then asked, "Are you the person I like?" Caleb suggested he could pretend, imagining someone else. He moved closer, his breath warm. He proposed Liam think about that girl from his literature seminar, the one he'd apparently taken out for coffee a few times. Liam barely remembered her. They had worked on one group project, nothing more. As Caleb's hand came up to cup his jaw, he asked if he'd guessed correctly. The pressure was surprisingly firm. Liam told him he hadn't. A faint click sounded from overhead, and the entryway was suddenly flooded with light. Liam flinched. Caleb stared at him, his expression unreadable. He raised a hand and covered Liam's eyes. "The light isn't on?" he murmured, before his lips met Liam's. It was slow at first, then deepened. Liam wanted to ask him when it had started. He wanted to know why neither of them had ever been brave enough. But it was too late for everything. He couldn't bring himself to push him away. He would ask when it was over. When this kiss ended, he would get the answers he needed, and then, even if they couldn't be together, he would have no regrets. But when he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the entryway. A colleague was helping him into a hotel room, and Caleb's voice was behind them, asking how much he'd had to drink. The colleague explained that the client had been pushy with the drinks. Recognizing Caleb, he handed Liam over and left. Caleb supported him with one arm while fumbling for the room key. Liam buried his face in Caleb's shoulder, inhaling the crisp, clean scent of his cologne. Caleb asked if he could walk. Liam mumbled an incoherent reply. Caleb grumbled about his non-existent tolerance, then used his body to push the door open and lifted him into his arms. His arms were strong, his chest solid. As Caleb laid him on the bed, Liam finally spoke. "I'm not drunk." Caleb's retort was automatic and sarcastic, but he stopped as he reached to loosen Liam's tie. He saw that Liam was telling the truth. His eyes were clear and he was smiling. Caleb didn't know that Liam had spent years using alcohol to chase him out of his dreams, and in the process, had developed a formidable tolerance. Back then, he had continued the charade of being drunk. This time, he didn't want to. Caleb demanded to know why he had been clinging to that other man like a limpet. Liam explained with a weak smile that he was just trying to look dedicated for his year-end performance review. Caleb made a sound of disgust, remarking on how cunning he'd become. He admitted he had been completely fooled and had even ordered him some broth from room service. Liam didn't remember that detail. In the original memory, his mind had been consumed with how to get Caleb to undress him. He had failed spectacularly. Caleb hadn't just refused. He had rebuttoned Liam's shirt, told him to sleep it off, and left the room. It was only later that he learned Caleb had stood guard outside the door all night. But the humiliation of the rejection had been absolute. He looked at Caleb and asked if he had seen him in the restaurant downstairs. Caleb didn't deny it. He said he knew the client, a man with a reputation for being predatory. He told Liam he needed to be careful. Caleb had matured. The change was stark now that Liam had just relived his younger years. The restless energy was contained beneath a perfectly tailored suit. He felt a pang of sadness, wondering if Caleb would wear a suit like this to his engagement party tomorrow. Then he remembered there was no tomorrow for him. Caleb waved a hand in front of his face, a faint smile playing on his lips, asking what he was spacing out about. Liam's gaze fixed on that smile. He told Caleb that he tied his tie very well. Caleb looked down, surprised. He said he thought the technique was universal, then glanced at Liam's own loosened tie and chuckled. He said if he wanted a lesson, he should just ask. He reached over, undid his own tie, and draped it around Liam's neck, his fingers brushing his skin as he began to explain the steps. Liam wasn't listening. The silk was still warm from Caleb's body. Caleb fumbled the knot, his movements suddenly clumsy. The chime of the room service cart arriving saved him. He became a whirlwind of activity, fussing over the soup, checking his phone, counting the windows on the building across the street. Anything to avoid looking at Liam. Once the soup had cooled, he handed it to him, instructing him to drink some even if he wasn't drunk. Liam took a sip and declared that it was terrible. Caleb, surprised, took the spoon and tasted it himself, saying it tasted like any other broth. He noticed Liam staring at the spoon he had just used and became flustered, apologizing and saying he would go wash it. Liam grabbed his wrist. "What for?" he asked. Caleb replied that it was dirty. Liam questioned this, reminding him that they had kissed on that night when the power went out. The words hung between them, and Caleb's entire body went rigid. His voice was strained as he asked if Liam was still upset about that. He apologized, insisting it had just been a momentary impulse. If Liam hadn't just relived it, he might have believed him. He called him a liar, asking how an impulse could last that long. Caleb's throat worked, but no sound came out. Liam pressed on, his own time running out. He begged him not to be silent anymore, not to swallow his words. He asked why he had lied. When Caleb's eyes darted away, Liam moved to block his view. Caleb closed his eyes. He finally admitted it was because Liam had ignored him for 3 days after that night. He had waited outside Liam's house only to overhear him telling someone on the phone that something was disgusting. He didn't want them to become strangers. Liam stared, dumbfounded. He protested that it wasn't like that, asking why Caleb had never just asked him what he was thinking. Caleb's voice trembled as he pleaded with him to stop. He said that what he wanted then was the same as what he wanted now, for them to just stay as they were. The misunderstanding, born from silence and fear, had become a chasm that had swallowed their youth. It was laughable, really. He told Caleb the truth. He had been so deliriously happy after their kiss that he'd spent half the night on his balcony in the cool air and had woken up with a raging fever. He hadn't wanted Caleb to see him looking so wretched, and he hadn't known how to face him, so he had hidden for a few days. The disgusting thing he'd overheard had been about the foul-tasting herbal remedy his aunt had been forcing him to drink. By the time he'd worked up the courage to talk to Caleb, he was met with the cool dismissal of it being an impulse. Caleb's hands hung at his sides, his face a mask of disbelief. It wasn't the joy of a requited love, nor the regret of a resolved misunderstanding. He just looked lost. He whispered, asking if that was really why they had missed their chance. Such a small thing. He asked if Liam was sure he wasn't drunk. "Caleb, I love you," Liam said, his voice clear and steady. For a very, very long time, Caleb's eyes widened. Liam wanted to make up for all the years of missed kisses, but one night would never be enough. There was so little time left. He told Liam he needed to rest. Liam clung to him, knowing this was the final scene. After Caleb's rejection in the hotel, he had been so devastated that he had requested a job transfer to a city on the other side of the country. He had heard nothing of Caleb for nearly a year, until Aaron had visited on a business trip. Aaron had mentioned casually that his brother was getting married next month, and asked if he would come back for it. Liam had dropped his coffee cup, the ceramic shattering on the floor. He had bent to pick up the pieces, hit his head on the table on the way up, and ended up a heap on the floor. Aaron had rushed to his side, asking if he was okay. He wasn't. He would never be okay again. "Why are you crying?" The hotel bed was a mess of tangled sheets. Caleb gathered him close, his voice laced with concern, asking if he was hurt. Liam couldn't speak through his sobs. Caleb murmured that he was there, then reached for the tissue box, gently dabbing at his tears. He promised that next time would be better, that he would be more prepared. "Next time?" Liam asked. Caleb said he could come over tomorrow after work. He'd learned to make barbecue ribs, and Liam's old video game save was still on his console. He promised it wouldn't hurt tomorrow. But Liam's head was splitting open now, a high-pitched ringing in his ears that drowned out everything else. The plane was going down. He wrapped his arms around Caleb, terrified, confessing that he didn't want to die. Caleb didn't answer. Just before dawn, a light rain began to fall. It wasn't heavy, but it was persistent. The wedding planner called, gently suggesting that if the rain didn't stop, they would have to move the ceremony indoors. Caleb, staring out the window, told her that was fine. He hung up and picked up a glass, the clinking of ice cubes against the crystal the only sound in the room. A strange tightness had settled in his chest, an inexplicable anxiety that had been building all morning. He rubbed his temples, but the dull throb remained. He stood abruptly, grabbing his jacket. He told Aaron, who was on the phone, that he was going to pick up Liam. Aaron was quiet for a moment, then pointed out how early it was. He suggested that if Caleb was that nervous, he should go for a run. Caleb informed him he'd already run 5 miles. He was leaving and Aaron was in charge. The garage door opened to a curtain of gray rain. As he started the car, Aaron's voice came through the speaker, a long, drawn-out sigh. He called him a coward. For once, Caleb didn't argue. He agreed, which was why he was going early this time. He arrived at the airport hours ahead of schedule, thinking the wait would calm his nerves. It only made it worse. He sat in his car, repeatedly refreshing the flight tracker app. It had departed on time. Just a few more hours. He needed to keep busy. He took out a cloth and began wiping down the passenger seat for what felt like the 100th time. Then it occurred to him that Liam might not want to sit up front. He climbed into the back and started cleaning there, too. Halfway through, he decided the pine-scented air freshener was too strong. He sped to an auto parts store and, just in case, bought 3 other scents. He thought about how Liam probably wouldn't have much of an appetite after the long flight. He bought a bag of trail mix and then, worried about dehydration, stopped at a fruit stand. Fresh fruit was a better option than coffee or soda. As the owner bagged some apples for him, he bickered with a neighbor while his young child whined for his attention. Annoyed, the owner handed the boy his phone. The kid went quiet, the silence replaced by the tinny, repetitive music of a viral video. A minute later, the boy shouted again. "Mommy!" The airplane fell out of the sky. Caleb had only bought a lottery ticket once in his life with Liam. He'd scoffed, telling Liam he didn't need the money. Liam, carefully checking the numbers, had replied that he didn't understand. It was a luck detector. If he won, he was going to do something big. He never said what. He didn't win. Caleb's eyes snapped to the small television mounted in the corner of the fruit stand. He stared at the breaking news banner. Every number, every letter of the flight code was seared into his memory. It matched the one on the news report. He woke to a splitting headache, staring at a white ceiling, completely unable to move. So this was being dead. He was disappointed. His body felt just as heavy as it had in life. He'd expected to be ethereal, to float. He tried to will himself to rise, but nothing happened. He started to wonder if ghosts could use GPS. He had a terrible sense of direction. What if he floated all the way to Caleb's wedding venue only to find the reception was already over? He had to see Caleb in a suit. A dark gray flannel one with a silver tie, just like the one he was seeing right now. But the knot was a mess, loose and crooked. His gaze traveled up to the man's face. His throat moved as he swallowed. He asked if Liam was awake. Before Liam could process it, a crowd of people swarmed his bed. His vision was filled with the faces of his parents, who had barely spoken to him in years, and Aaron. The thought occurred to him that the flashes of his life hadn't ended. But this scene wasn't one of his memories. A horrifying realization dawned on him, and tears began to stream down his face. Had everyone died? Someone shouted that he was crying and to get a doctor. A nurse asked if he could hear them, to raise his hand if he could. He tried, but his arm wouldn't obey. Someone else started crying, saying he couldn't hear. Amid the chaos, Caleb's voice cut through, telling everyone to quiet down and get out. He watched as Caleb leaned over him, his hand gentle on his head. Caleb told him not to panic, that the temporary paralysis was from the prolonged lack of oxygen and that he would be okay. If Caleb said he would be okay, he believed it. 2 days later, he was taking his first shaky steps. He hadn't died. The co-pilot, with the help of the autopilot, had managed an emergency ascent, a textbook miracle. But his brain had suffered. He found himself repeating things, forgetting he'd just said them. He told Caleb he had brought them all gifts, but he didn't know where they were now. Caleb, who was slicing an apple, paused for a fraction of a second, and Liam realized he must have said this before. Caleb simply nodded as if hearing it for the first time and said it didn't matter. Liam chewed the small piece of apple, then quietly asked about the engagement party. Caleb told him it had been postponed, not canceled. A wave of disappointment washed over him as he swallowed. He mumbled an apology, blaming himself. Caleb cut him off, telling him to stop talking nonsense and open his mouth. He'd been so gentle the past few days that it had felt like being with a stranger. The familiar gruffness was almost a relief. His face grew warm as he thought about their night in the hotel. Caleb noticed his flushed cheeks and reached out to feel his forehead, asking if he had a fever. The touch immediately brought back the memory of the dark entryway, and Liam's face burned even hotter. As Caleb reached for his phone to call a nurse, Liam remembered something important. He asked Caleb where his phone was. It had been in an evidence bag and the battery was dead. Even after charging, the screen remained black. Caleb promised to buy him a new one, but Liam needed to know if those last, desperate messages had gone through. At the time, he'd been connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi, but he hadn't checked if it was working. Part of him was at peace. Those flashes of his life had brought him a sense of closure. He could even bring himself to wish Caleb and his partner well, provided he never saw those messages. He tried to ask about Caleb's fiancée, but the words caught in his throat. Who was she? Caleb, looking up from his phone, asked who he meant. Realizing, he replied that she was fine. She was a business partner. Liam gathered his courage again and asked if fine meant they were in love. Caleb clarified that her qualifications were fine, and that their families needed a stronger bond to support a new joint venture. It was an arranged marriage. The most rebellious of the three brothers was ultimately the most obedient. It had only been 6 months since Liam had left town. He couldn't believe Caleb's feelings had changed so quickly. His capitulation must have been a result of Liam's own actions, cutting off all contact. The thought made him sick. He asked how long the venture would last. It was a long-term project. He felt even worse. It was as if Caleb had sold himself out of despair. Liam pulled the covers over his head. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, Caleb was there. He got out of bed and padded down the hall to the nurse's station, asking if he could have some alcohol. The nurse stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. He wandered toward the hospital's convenience store, but she caught him, begging him to behave. He shuffled back to his room. Afraid to sleep, he paced for a bit, then looked down at the drawstring of his pajama pants. If he couldn't have a drink, he would find another way to quiet his mind. He was leaning against the cool tile of the bathroom wall, trying to remember what Caleb had done that night, when his legs gave out. He stumbled, his first thought not of his own safety, but of the poor nurse who was about to have a major incident on her hands. To survive a plane crash only to die in such an ignominious way would surely make a list of the world's most bizarre deaths. But he didn't hit the floor. A pair of strong arms caught him. The chest was firm and familiar. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing in the small, dark space. The situation would have been merely embarrassing if his hand wasn't where it was. He struggled, telling Caleb to let go, but his grip was tight. Caleb's voice was a low murmur against his ear as he asked who had taught him to do that. The warm air made him shiver. His voice was deeper than usual, colored with an emotion Liam couldn't place. He asked if it was a skill he had developed while he was away. Caleb sounded so formal, like he was delivering a business proposal. Liam mumbled that he had figured it out himself. Caleb chuckled, a low, humorless sound. He helped him stand only to press him back against the wall. He flicked off the light, plunging them into darkness. His voice was a velvet rasp. He asked if Liam was sure he knew what he was doing. Liam's head was spinning. He needed to say something. He asked again about Caleb's fiancée. Caleb's movements stilled. Liam realized with a jolt that he had already asked this. He corrected himself, asking where his phone was. Caleb let out a shaky breath and told him he'd bought a new one and left it on the nightstand. That wasn't it either. Finally, he found the right question. He asked Caleb why he was willing to be with him now, when he had rejected him and left him alone in that hotel room. Caleb switched the light on. In the warm yellow glow, Liam could see the desire plain on his face. He was poised at a critical point, and Liam instinctively moved against him. Caleb's voice was rough. "Who is in front of you right now? Liam?" "It's you," Liam breathed. "Who am I?" "Caleb." "Yes, it's me." Caleb buried his face in Liam's neck, holding him so tightly there wasn't an inch of space between them. He explained that Liam hadn't been coherent that night. He hadn't been able to recognize him. He couldn't take advantage of him. In truth, Liam thought he had been too embarrassed to say his name. Now, in this moment, he was the one who was truly incoherent. He woke to bright daylight, staring at the ceiling. He saw the new phone on the nightstand. When the nurse came in for her rounds, he burrowed under the covers, his voice a hoarse whisper. She asked suspiciously if he had been drinking. He hadn't, but he was nursing a different kind of hangover. He entertained the fleeting hope that it had all been a dream. After she left, he checked for evidence. He had barely begun his inspection when Caleb walked in. He froze, then raised an eyebrow. He remarked that it was a little early in the day for that sort of thing. Liam yanked the covers back over himself, mortified, and snapped that he should learn to knock. Caleb grinned, saying he would have missed the view. He placed a container of food on the table and reached a hand under the blankets. As Liam felt his weight settle on the bed, he protested, saying they couldn't. Caleb simply replied that no one would see them. Liam was aghast at his casual acceptance of this clandestine affair. He insisted that this kind of sordid relationship had to stop. Sordid? Caleb's smile vanished. "You're saying that two people who have known each other their whole lives, who have been in love with each other for years, and who finally got together have a sordid relationship?" Liam didn't understand. Caleb's expression grew serious. He asked if he had forgotten again. "Forgotten what?" Liam asked, confused. Caleb sighed and took out his phone. He opened a voice memo and pressed play. Liam's own voice, raw and choked with tears, filled the room. "Caleb, I love you." For a very, very long time. He stared in disbelief. He asked when he had said that. Caleb told him it was the day after he woke up. But the date on the voice memo was from 6 months ago. Liam asked if he had only been awake for 3 days. "It's been 6 months, Caleb said softly. He leaned down and kissed him. "It's okay. You haven't missed anything. Everything is going to be all right." His recovery was slow. The post-traumatic stress caused intermittent amnesia, making him forget recent events, trapping him in a loop around the time of the accident. They were together now, but he asked Caleb what his family would say. Caleb assured him they were all for it. Liam asked about the business marriage. Caleb said it was still happening. Business was important. "渣男?" Liam was horrified. He had loved a monster. Caleb's eyes narrowed. He asked if he had forgotten this too. Liam hesitated, then said he remembered. Caleb was getting engaged to a business partner, a long-term arrangement. He called him a philanderer and said he wanted to break up. Caleb corrected him, pointing out that he had misremembered the most important part. He showed him a photo on his phone. It was Caleb's older brother with a woman he didn't recognize. He insisted it had always been his brother. But he remembered Aaron telling him it was Caleb. Caleb told him it didn't matter now. It was all settled. Liam finally felt brave enough to ask. He wanted to know if Caleb had ever received his voice messages from the plane. Caleb smirked and asked what kind of scandalous things he had sent. Then he saw that Liam hadn't even opened the new phone yet. Liam quickly found Caleb's contact. The most recent message was from over a year ago, from Caleb. "I'm outside if you need me." He looked up. Caleb was watching him, his curiosity piqued. He demanded to know what he had sent. Liam mimicked his earlier tone. "It doesn't matter," he said. "I've already reset." He saw the confusion on Caleb's face. He assured him that his video game save was untouched and that they could continue playing when he was discharged next month. He paused. What if, by next month, he forgot again? "It's okay," Caleb said, his voice soft. "As long as you remember me, and that I'll always love you."